I have my LinkedIn open here as well. Okay, perfect. Hi, everybody. How's everybody doing today on this Wednesday morning Pacific time? Last time I started with a quick icebreaker, which was, what did you have for breakfast today? Or what do you usually like to have? So I'll start. I had oatmeal and a nice cup of chai for my breakfast this morning. And Avino?
Yeah. Oh, wow. I had a mixture of stuff. It was like overnight oats, honey, blackberries, yogurt, raw tahini, and coffee, and just a mishmash of stuff.
Sounds really good. I always feel like talking about breakfast gets, at least for me, in this nice, good mood that, we can kick off the panel on a nice, positive touch. So that's why I love doing this. But that sounds delicious, Avi. And how about you, Erica?
So I'm going to be the one setting the bad example here. I've had half a cup of tea today, but I plan to eat immediately after this. So sorry, guys, I don't really have an exciting answer. It was hibiscus tea, if that helps at all. It's
That
delicious.
does help. Yeah, I love hibiscus.
It's a good start. It's a good start.
Yeah. How about you, Hiro?
Yeah, I'm following Erica's suit. So unfortunately, I haven't had breakfast, but that's by design because I'm going into a dental wisdom tooth removal later, and I cannot drink or eat before that. So you all are making me feel very hungry, but I'm not there yet.
Good luck. Yeah, good luck with
Benefit
that.
is I get to eat ice creams afterwards.
That's perfect. Good luck with that. I know wisdom tooth removal is like just need to take some rest afterwards. So give yourself the time to rest. How about you, Saba? Any breakfast insights?
Actually, I had breakfast, a bit of a small bite for lunch as well because I'm in the EST zone. So yeah, I just had breakfast specifically. I had my smoothie of spinach and banana. Not too interesting, just I think very healthy. But I had a small bite of lunch as well. So yeah.
That sounds awesome. So, and I'll check here. I think I have the ability to check in LinkedIn if for comments coming in. So I'll go to the chat too so that I can kind of see that. We have Barka, an old friend of mine, posting here. I wonder, after wisdom tooth removal, are you still wise?
I hope to stay so. I will still have 2 more wisdom tooth, so maybe I'm half wise.
Yeah. With all her AI product management knowledge that Hiro posts about Barka, I think that we can be rest assured she's going to continue to be wise. Okay, let's jump into a little bit about today. So I'm Priyanka Upadhyay. Friends call me Pri. I am a product and leadership coach. I have been working as a product leader for about 18 years now. I've spent about 10 years on the East Coast at this point and 10 years ish on the West Coast. I'm a New York transplant, always more biased that New York food is better than San Francisco. So we can talk about that afterward. And a quick note about why I started this panel. So I've worked across many different industry verticals, retail, finance, healthcare, energy, high tech, you name it. I have worked in so many different industry verticals while being a program manager on the other side, and then also being a product manager and product leader, working for companies like ServiceNow and Salesforce, right? And a lot of my experience is on the B2B side. And something that has been consistent across, and especially more on the tech side, I would say, is this not enough diversity in the teams that I've worked with, right? And that's what motivated me to start this panel, because one of the things that I feel is tech and product management careers probably don't feel as accessible to people who don't already come from a certain education pedigree or a certain background. And I want to empower everybody that, you can be a product manager, you can be a web engineer, you can be whatever you want to be. And so the goal is to break some of those barriers. And those are some of the topics we're going to talk about today. So with that, I can hand it over to our panel for our quick intros. I feel they always do a better job of giving their own intros than me introducing them. But a quick note is that we will talk for about, it's about 10:10 now, so we'll talk for about 30 minutes. We have some questions for the panel that I'm going to be asking them to learn from their journey. And then I want to open it up to audience Q&A towards the end and tackle some questions that you might have. So if you are listening in, please send us your questions and comments as they come to mind. So I'll hand it over to Avi for a quick intro.
Yeah, so hey everyone, I'm Avi. Full name's Avi Noam, if you can pronounce it. I've been a PM for about 14 years now, similarly to Pri across different industries from analytics to e-commerce to productivity to social networking, mainly B2B, past 3 years B2C, working on the feed at LinkedIn. And I have a BA in insurance from a college that probably none of you have heard about in Israel. And I never practice anything in insurance. I don't like the field. I did it a little bit as an internship and I quit my job with no prospects. And I completely stumbled onto tech by mistake and to PM by mistake. And I'm really happy that it happened that way because I feel that there's magic to innocence and unawareness sometimes that allows you to just do whatever feels right and not think about it too much. So it's a little bit about me.
That's amazing. Thanks for that story, Avindam. And I think that's one of the barriers actually for people, right? Like we feel like we don't come from that perfect background and sometimes we don't even apply to the job. So that's really cool. How about you, Erica?
Sure, I have a very similar history and path to Avi. So my name is Erica. I'm a data engineer / data product manager at Salesforce currently. I graduated from college with a degree in psychology and neuroscience, and I was convinced that I was going to go into consumer research, and my dream company to work for at that time was Procter & Gamble. Like I said, I am now at Salesforce, and sometimes I'm still not sure how I got here, but basically during one job that I had at a cruise line when I was still living in Miami, I got exposed to data and the concept of using data to drive business decisions and to run your business, which had kind of been foreign to me up until that point. And so kind of on a whim, I just moved to the Bay Area to see if I could make it out here and kind of break into tech. And so, yeah, I started as an associate, became an analyst, then what I think we're now calling like a BI engineer and analytics engineer, and then became a formal data engineer. And now I'm like dabbling in data architecture and data product management.
That is amazing too. I love your story, Erica, as well. How about you, Hero?
Yeah, it resonated, Erica, a lot around that pushing through persistence and following. My name is Hiral. I'm originally from India, studied computer science as well as business degrees. So I have a little bit of that traditional path. I started my career more in engineering and software development back at Apple, and then got my MBA in more, that's where like at Apple is where I got exposure to more of product responsibilities. But back then I did not know that is what product managers are or are supposed to do. So in that scenario, it's definitely something I've stumbled into. But thinking about my just break into tech, it was very much like, of course, the computer science degree, but I was also during the burst in like the 2007-8 timeframe that I was trying to look for things. So like, I think the perspective I had, right, resonating with like the persistence to get into Apple was literally standing in line for an hour at the career booth fair that my alma mater hosted and really get my resume on the top of the pile or at least talk to someone, which is what kind of, and then of course continues to follow up and just persist to kind of even get a chance to interview there. So that's a bit about my story into tech, but since then I've taken on a lot of product different roles, more than a decade experience in different parts for B2B, B2B2C kind of exposures.
That's amazing. Thank you, Hero. How about you, Saba?
Yeah, I have a similar path like Hiral. I think I'm a little bit on from the traditional path here. So I did my bachelor's in computer science. I loved the whole space of problem solving with software. But outside, like after my graduation, I took up a role in it was called a delivery team at that time, which was more like you're more client facing or to your customers, and you talk to your customers on a regular basis to drive the product as such. But it was not about product at that time. But then after that, I moved from India. So I'm originally from India. I moved from India to the US for my master's, and then I went into software. But I did a bit of software engineering, and then moved my path into the product management space. At that time, I think they were like formal product manager roles. So I transitioned from there. Yeah, I've been in the workforce for almost 9 years now. Actually, I was just thinking about it yesterday. I'm like, oh shoot, time flies. And then I've been in the travel industry. I love travel industry, but I felt it was a little slow and a lot of legacy systems. I wanted something fast moving. So I moved to e-com. Been in e-com for quite a while, and now I'm at Yelp as a senior product manager. So yeah, that's about me.
That is amazing. Great journey, everybody, and thank you for sharing a little bit about you. So one question that I had, which you spoke to a little bit, but we can dig a little deeper, is how did you start your career, or how did you get your first full-time job? What was the hiring process like? And how do you think your diverse background impacted you, like positively or negatively? Or maybe it didn't impact you. But yeah, just tell us a little bit about how did you start your first full-time corporate job? So I'll start with Avi again, since you're to my right, if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure. So as I said, this is after college, quit my internship, didn't do anything for 3 months, really didn't have any prospects. Some friend connected me to a company called LivePerson, and I did a pretty simple, straightforward interview to become like a support chat agent and do like the night shift. It was like an hourly pay, and it paid more than working at a pension fund. So I took it and I got free lunches, and I felt like I was working in tech, which was like really cool. And I'm originally from Israel. So in Israel, there's all these fun perks, free lunches. It's pretty nice. So started doing that. And this goes back, I think, to how I think my diversity and like being a little different helped. Kind of going into tech, I was very unaware of hierarchy. I was very unaware of roles and functions. It's almost like a puppy walking around and just very, very positive and optimistic. And I think it's a little bit of a superpower that you lose the longer you spend in your career. You become very, very aware, start to think about what people are going to think, and like there's a lot of craft that goes into it. And I think that the fact that I wasn't like everybody else helped me just dare to think about. I noticed that our commission model was really not really great. I think if I had all this awareness of all the systems around me, I wouldn't have done what I'd done. Just like I just built a better commission model, and I showed it to my boss, and he was like, "That makes a lot of sense, and it's a win-win." And then I saw that there were people across the hallway who were account managers. So I just walked up to their manager and I said, "I'd really like to be on your team." And like it's a complete lack of awareness of like, is there a process? Do you have to wait 18 months? And 2 months in, I got transitioned. And then within a year and a half, again, same thing. Like I was having an issue with my customers as an account manager. So I just spent my spare time building literally like a spreadsheet that would take their data and just help with customers not churning. And that thing actually ended up becoming a line of business within the company because I just kind of skunk worked it with a couple of folks and we started selling it as a package. And it really took off. And all of a sudden I was asked, like, do you want to lead this as a line of business? And barely 2 years into tech, I had no idea what I was doing, but I said yes, because it seemed like an amazing opportunity. And this was like a public company. So it took like less than 2 years to go from a chat support agent doing the night shift to being on the leadership group within a 1,000-person company. And I think all of that is because of, I just wasn't aware of what I don't know. I just did what felt right. And there was a problem and I tried to solve it. And you don't ask for permission or make sure it looks good. You just go and solve the problem, which is what you're trying to do. And that was kind of my path into it. And I think that's how I guess like my lack of, call it like technical background or like the right degree or right university actually kind of helped me. I call it a complete lack of awareness, but I think that's an important perspective to have.
Yeah, that's so helpful. I think it's all these perceived barriers, right? That when we know too much about the perceived barriers, we might just sit back and not even try. Whereas with you, it's like you didn't know about the perceived barriers, and hence you didn't, really worry too much about them, I guess, and put in a lot of effort. Sounds like to solve the problem, like you said. So it's an awesome story. How about you, Erica? In terms of your first full-time job, and how was the hiring process like, and
Sure.
job?
Sure. So my story is not quite as exciting, and I wanted to apologize. I have a very large and aggressive cat who may be joining us from time to time because he follows no rules. But for me, let's see, my first job in tech was about, frightening, 9 years ago. I moved from Miami out here to work for Box as an associate, and I was supporting like their SMB customer success team and also Box Consulting. Like I said before, I graduated at the tail end of the recession in 2011 with a degree in psychology and neuroscience. And at that time, no one was hiring. I moved to New York immediately after college. And I remember walking around with my resume in my little portfolio, and like I couldn't even get a job scooping ice cream. Like it was a disaster. Just no one was hiring. Any internship that I got, I would have it for a few months, and then like businesses were just shutting down left and right. So I, for some reason, made the bold decision to move from New York to Miami. My senior year roommate in college at the time had moved down there because she had gotten a job with Teach for America, and she said, "Hey, just come down here and live with me, and let's see if we can figure things out." So I started taking a series of kind of odd jobs. Like I think I was a cashier at a restaurant. I was a freelance writer for a while. I also did business development at a design firm. I just did a ton of things, and nothing felt quite right. And I had always been interested in tech and had always felt like the allure of tech, but I never thought that it was something that I could break out into, simply because I didn't know anyone else working in tech at that time. And also at that time, Miami was not like a tech-centric city compared to what it is now. So I ended up landing a job at Norwegian Cruise Line because one industry that is huge in Miami is the cruise industry. And through that company, I got exposed to the continuous improvement team, which took a lot of principles from Kaizen, if you guys are familiar with that. It was big with Toyota like in the 50s. And that team was super, super, super data focused. And so we would collect data from shipboard teams. We would like analyze data across all the different ships for different processes and try to compare them and optimize them. And it was really exciting. And it was the first time that I was really able to use Excel and not just like record information, but build formulas and create these workbooks that were, like, I don't know, software engineering light. And it was just very exciting to me. But I realized that my opportunities at Norwegian Cruise Line would kind of be maxed out, and I would never be able to kind of fully jump into like the data field in a way that I truly wanted to. And there was no way really that I was going to be in the tech industry in Miami because that just really wasn't available then. So basically I had a friend from college that was working at Box out in, where were they at the time? Los Altos. And I reached out to her and said, "Hey, I think I want to move to the Bay Area, and I really am in love with data, and I think I want to pursue this as a career, and you're the only person I know working in tech. Can you refer me? There's an associate job open, and I'm just going to try to go for it." And so she did. And that interview process took 4 months because I don't know if things are different now, but moving from across the country to California, it was almost like people were skeptical. Like, is this girl serious? Like, she's just getting exposed to data and tech. Like, she's very fresh. And so like my boss at the time dragged that process out for 4 months until he felt that like I was the right person. And then, I dropped everything and moved out here and started my career in tech. And the interview process was fun because I told nobody in Miami that I was interviewing because I was so nervous. So I basically flew to California from Florida one night after work, did my interview, and then flew back the next day and pretended that nothing had happened. So I guess that part was a little bit exciting. It felt very spy-like. But yeah, that's my breakout story into tech.
That's really cool, Erica. And actually, thank you for sharing some of the details, like the 4 months, right? Because I know there's a lot of people going through job searches and interviews right now. and people who are very skilled, who know how to build a good roadmap, who know how to prioritize in product, or who are very good engineers, who know how to build good things. And it's like you still don't have a job 3.5 months later, and then you start to wonder, is something wrong with you? So there's nothing wrong with you. I just want to say that out loud to anybody who's watching. This was way back when, Erica, that you described your story, right? And I've experienced something similar when I first came to the US, but I'll talk about that in a minute. Pass it to Hiro. How did you get your first job, and what was the hiring process like? And anything from a diversity lens you can share that you observed.
Yeah. Very inspiring stories, Avinoam and Erica. For me, like I was touching a little bit briefly, a lot of this. So I grew up in the Indian culture environment. A lot of times, fighting my way, even to just like demanding to study further and all. There was a lot of skepticism. So for me, like school and education were a lot of my pathway to like breaking or getting that financial independence. So I was touching briefly on this. The part I talked about, like the way I got in was more from school, my break into tech. But the part I did not go was like internship. So between 2 years, I wanted to really like, get a good internship, get in, in computer science field, because that's what I was studying. And then it's easier, right? Once you get an internship to convert, because I know I'm a very hardworking, I'll prove this out. It was during internship I had applied to Apple. I had even started the interview, but then they had gone cold. And I was like, okay, that's what normally people do. And I don't want to make this about like men or women, but like, I'm like, oh, you asked, maybe they didn't like me, but they never got back with the reject or anything. And I saw my friends at school do differently. They were really pushing. They were very much like continuously following up, sending more insights, sending more things, why they cared about, why they want to work at Apple and some of those things. And there were two of them who landed internships at Apple. And I was I was like, oh yeah, I'll wait it out. You just like, this is a traditional process. Job boards are there. You apply, you put your resume, and if they get, you get, you don't. And I would move on to the next thing, never really focusing. And that's what was a turning point. And I saw this a lot of my male friends, I would say, do this way more. And again, it may not have been gender diversity, but it was just the approach and what they were trained with doing that really brought that back to me when I was doing full time. I was like, no, I'm going to go. And it didn't matter. It wasn't just about Apple, but it was very much like, I'm going to make sure they at least are aware that I really care about this opportunity and I want to do that. So I stood in line. It was at the career fair that I really had a great conversation to the person who was hiring. And it turns out he was like a senior engineer. He took my resume directly to the hiring manager, which was what set me apart from that whole pile of resumes they got at campus. And that's why for me, since then, I've always gone to campuses, any opportunities to just like bring and hear a lot of people to hear that. And I didn't even know exactly what I was getting into, but the interview process was definitely like a lot of different conversations, but at some point it had gone cold again. And I was like, no, I'm going to keep pushing. I was going to come to the Bay Area. I was on East Coast at that point, similar, but I was like, hey, I'm coming to the Bay Area for this other interview. Would you like to talk to me? Like, I can come on campus like this day. And I think that pushed them a little bit more to just be like, okay, come in, talk to people. And then once I did, I had to prepare. I knew I could put that part was under my control, but the rest. So I truly believe like from a diversity perspective, it's really just persisting, pushing, not letting any of the boundaries control you that has helped me throughout time and time again.
Thank you so much, Hiro. And I think you started, please correct me if I'm wrong, but you started more on the technical or engineering side at Apple, and then over time moved into product. So that's also, I think, a really inspiring story. How about you, Saba?
As I was hearing everybody speak, I was just reflecting on my journey as well. And I actually try to break it into two parts for me, because I did like a short stint in India before I moved to the US for my master's. And that was officially my first job. And coming from a different part of the world, the practices are very different. The way you get into job market, the way recruiting happens is very different. And I was kind of tuned in that zone that, okay, this is how it happens. And I had done one part of the process, or I'd already gone through the path one. So that was in my mind when I did my work in India. And then when I moved to the US for my master's, it's a complete different ballgame. I mean, the culture is really different here. You know, it's a North American culture. And then the program that I did in my university was 1 year, MEng, Cornell, and then in the East Coast. And it was a lot of changes for me, culturally, even in terms of like personal, professional, everything. And then coming to a different part of the country, world, in a new country, you're kind of getting used to the new ways of working, and you have to really unlearn what you did back in your previous work journey, and then learn something new here, and then apply for jobs. And so I think for me, that was something that was like a learning curve. So when I was applying for jobs here after my master's with 1 year program, with similar to what Hiral's mentioned, standing in lines and the career booths, talking to, the different people from different companies, pitching out yourself. And it was all very new for me. And a lot of other folks, I'm sure, were also, doing it for the first time. So it took some time for me to like really learn, okay, you have to go out there, you have to be yourself, you have to put yourself out there. I think it's also a pinch of culture that you come from, because you're not used to that much in at least from where I come from, South Asian. I'm coming from a South Asian country, and I'm not used to like putting out talking about myself. It's more like, okay, you studied here, you've done your courses here, you'll talk about your work more and your projects more. But I think what I learned here is, you have to go out there, put yourself out, really push yourself beyond limits and boundaries to get that first job. So that was like from the experience point of view. So it was me again standing in the career lines, talking to every company who was there, getting that first job, interviewing. But at the same time, like to what Hiral mentioned, I would apply, I would wait, I would think at least 10 times before following up. I mean, like, am I pushing myself too much? Is it these biases, questions that are there in your mind? So that was my journey with my first job here in the North American region. Yeah.
That's amazing. I'll just share the only fun thing that I remember is I had this lucky purple shirt that I wore to every interview. This was after my master's, and Express used to have a lot of discounts back then. So I had this purple shirt from Express that I wore to every interview. And the other thing too is that the region you're in also influences how and where you apply. So, being on the East Coast, who was hiring at the time when I graduated back in 2004, after graduating from Columbia, is banks were still hiring. Parts of the country had not still fully recovered from 9/11. And so, it was a lot about focusing your efforts on who's hiring and making compromises in that way. And like Avi said, not necessarily looking at it like a compromise, like I was just super thrilled to be doing technology in a bank. Like I had amazing perks, I was thankful for that. And so I think that, and today looking back all these years later, like that has shaped my career in a really positive way. That's what got me in. Like B2B was never hot and sexy and exciting before. And today, everybody wants to learn about enterprise product management. I'm like, nobody used to talk to us back in 2005, So anyway, be open to possibilities, I guess, is what I'm trying to say, if you're in the job market right now. So we're kind of at already 10:30, time flies. So let's tackle maybe one or two more questions that I had in mind. I think let's do this one here, which was, I think the bias in hiring process, right? And so let's think about maybe job descriptions in particular, or resume reviews. The first step to, either reducing or overcoming bias is to recognize that it exists, right? And even if we've not faced it individually, like, I don't think my name necessarily gets people biased in a negative way, but I do recognize that there are other names that do get people biased in a negative way, right? So maybe if you can tell us, I'll lean into either Avi or Hiro to take this question. What kind of bias do you think commonly exists in job descriptions and the resume review process. And also you can share anything personal, like if you had a bias as a candidate or as a hiring manager, how did you learn about that and how did you do something about it? So I don't know who wants to
Kirill,
take
you want to go for it?
Yeah, I mean, I can go first. I think, it is definitely true. There is a lot of statistics out there that show you, how just changing job descriptions has helped companies get a way more diverse pool of candidates. So there is a lot. My first exposure to even being aware of this was back at Apple. So I joined Apple. I was actually leading I had co-founded and leading a Women at Apple Tech chapter, like a ERG, employee resource group. During that process, like just even forming and working with a lot of our senior leaders, as well as our HR department, I started to get this exposure and started to dig into this data and statistics. So NCWIT is an institute that publishes a lot of this research data around it. And what we found is our job descriptions at Apple were biased in a way that encouraged more male to apply than women, because women inherently have this tendency that unless you tick all the 10 boxes, they will not feel comfortable applying, right? Like, and we were talking about this in our intros. We were like, okay, yes, I'm an engineer, I do all of these, or maybe I don't have B2C experience, I should not apply, versus all the skills that are needed. And so what we did at that point was really worked with, so our HR team was a big advocate. They understood the data. They were like, okay, we're going to go look at all of our job descriptions and work with the hiring managers to really see what's a must-have versus nice to have. And get me wrong, like now I've been on the other side as a hiring manager, like for years. People don't put enough thought into writing job descriptions. Like that's just a fact. So forcing people to even go through that process helped people really calm down and understand, like, no, I don't probably need this, right? Like, so that, and then we tracked the data that I can't reveal, but we saw a big increase in the number of female candidates applying to jobs. Now, of course, there's a lot after that also in the hiring processes. There are biases a lot throughout the process that happens. But it helps you filter that, right? Like, so for me personally as well, like, because I've had degrees and from well-to-do schools, I am biased, and I know that, and I learned that through that process. Actually, at that point, that I'm biased towards good schools on people's resumes, but it's only now over time that I've learned it's not the only thing. So I always hold that at the back of the mind when I'm writing or when I'm reviewing candidates, is to not look at the education, especially when they have the work experience, is to really get to know them as a person and their skills.
That's amazing. Those are amazing insights, Hiro. Thank you for sharing. How about you, Avinam?
Yeah, I think for me, I don't think I've ever had the honor of taking it to that level, like changing job descriptions. That's really, really cool. But I think the things that I've noticed about, like, what biases exist and ways that I think could help improve them. So as you all said, like, I think the obvious things that are usually out there are things like a very specific narrow background or a specific type of degree. And I think often it can also go to like the pedigree of the university or like the certain level that it's at. I think that definitely exists. I've even heard it in like hallway conversations where it's like, well, so and so has an MBA from XYZ, and being the non-technical, non-Ivy League person that I am, I'm like in my mind saying, who cares? I mean, it's great. It shows a lot, but I think and I think another thing that kind of causes bias is even with the absence of that, a lot of job descriptions talk about skills, which is a good first step. But even the skills assume some kind of linear relationship between the type of work that you've done and the type of work that they're looking for. And I think that's also a bias, assuming that that is the only type of person that has a really good chance of succeeding at this role, where I think that like there is a bit of a magic zone that's disregarded, which is the transferability of skills. and the magic of cross-pollination. When people have worked in a completely unrelated industry, they all of a sudden come into a situation and they apply something from the health world to B2B, or they apply something from the tax world, like tax principles, into building a better experience that would resonate with the customer. And you're like, wow, that's so cool. And I feel like that's what we're all drawn to. We try and consume content around something that's inspiring from like a different world and try and bring it in. But job descriptions stay very narrow in that sense. And I feel that's something that can definitely improve. And it's like the next step of trying to understand beyond your skills, trying to get to know the person. And last but not least is like, I think a lot of job descriptions focus very, very much, are biased towards, call it hard skills. And soft skills are a bit of an afterthought. Like, we'll figure that out. We'll see how that pans out, when I think there's enough data and knowledge around the importance and the definition of, just to mention a few things like emotional quality, emotional quotient, empathy, things like that.
Wow, so well said, Avinav. I'm gonna write down that quote. It was like, cross-pollination is key, or something like that. And totally agree. I think the one thing that has bothered me, looking at people struggle through a job search, or even helping my clients right now as a coach, is that, and even being a candidate in the process many years ago, is that there's this assumption that you have to have done that same thing before. And my thinking is actually the opposite. If I've done that thing for 4 years, I'm bored. I want bigger, new challenges. Like, why would I take that job, right? And so I think the inherent, in my view, the definition of intelligence is being able to learn new things quickly. One of the angles of intelligence. And so I'm like, okay, you're inherently looking to hire people not very intelligent, because you're just looking for them to do the same thing. They did a roadmap for 5 years. They're going to be doing a roadmap again for the next 3 years. Like, sorry, I don't want that job. And so I think there's a lot of assumptions being made. And I'll give, again, one quick example is, I've worked with people through Stanford who are people from very diverse backgrounds. Like, we talked to an architect who was a client, like, trying to move into product management. And talking to her, I realized that, well, what does she do? Talks to customers, gathers requirements, creates the design blueprints, builds the thing, talks to her customers, demos, as the thing is getting built, and keeps in close contact, measures success, and delivers a product. So inherently, if the person is tech savvy, it's not so different than what we think it is. So I think reducing those biases would be huge in terms of helping people cross those barriers, like what Avinav was just talking about. Okay, let's do a quick closing question. I think let's talk about this one, which is, how do you get comfortable owning your own story in the interview process? So especially if you came from a non-traditional background, when we go into that interview, we're always, that thing going on in our head, that, oh, are they going to, not hire me because I don't come from a specific background, technical or experience or whatever it is, or education. So how do you get comfortable owning your own story? And I think one thing to keep in mind is, like, this is where our own biases might come into play, right? And what our own beliefs are about ourselves. So being mindful of that. So I think I can hand it over to either Erica or Avinav, whoever wants to take this.
I can take this one.
Yeah, go ahead, Erica.
So for me, especially coming from a non-traditional tech background, I always felt like, oh, you're so lucky to be here, and like, just you should be so thankful to be here, regardless of how people treat you, or regardless of how your work environment is, or regardless of how an interviewer speaks to you. You should just be happy to be here. And a lot of that just, I still struggle with a bit to this day, but especially earlier on in my career with tech, it was like rampant and just kind of my daily thoughts, like, just keep the peace, like, just be nice, just stay in this industry and see where it can take you. So I know when I interviewed, it's not like you can actually hide your background, but I was always trying to find a way to like spin it, not just appealing to the bullet points and job description, but really show people like, yes, I worked at a cruise line, and yes, I worked in business development, but look at how all these other things can make me like a more well-rounded employee, which it does, I now know, and didn't really at the time. But look, this can make me a well-rounded employee, and I can do this job. Just please give me a chance. Please give me the chance to grow and to learn. Almost like begging. And then as I got older and started working with other people, many of whom did have fancy degrees and had fancy internships, and realized we're still Googling the same things, and like we both have gaps in knowledge, and we can just all work together, and like degrees don't necessarily mean everything. I started to kind of just calm down a lot. So as I interviewed in other roles, I started just being more authentic and honest about who I am and where I come from, and how, like I said, that very unique background that I have makes me a very well-rounded, holistic employee that can bring other things to the table that you may not have had on the team before. Like, for example, I was a freelance writer for years. I've written for many publications. So whenever people need run books to be written or documentation, like I'm that person, and we don't have to go get a tech writer and like get resources from another team. Like I can just do it. And there are things, I've done more public speaking than some of the other engineers on teams that I've been with in the past, and just there are other skills that you can bring to the table. And I realize I don't have to be insecure about my non-traditional tech background when I'm going into interviews. I can own it, and that's okay. And then I think one of the other things that we talked about when we were kind of discussing topics, I've seen a lot of people recently, especially with layoffs happening, talk about how to explain that gap in your resume to a recruiter, or that gap on your LinkedIn to a recruiter. And I've seen a lot of people, offer consulting advice and how to phrase things and how to get recruiters to almost to like feel empathetic, or to have an apology or an excuse. And I guess maybe I come from a very different perspective, but I think honestly, especially with what we've seen happening in the past year or so with layoffs, we have to look out for ourselves. And if you took off 6 months because you needed to rest and recharge, then you should give yourself the freedom either to own that and tell the truth and say, I took 6 months off because I needed it for my mental health, or feel the freedom to say, I'd rather not disclose that. I think we deserve to have, you can love your job, but we deserve to have separation, and we deserve to create boundaries. And so that's just something else that I wanted to touch on in terms of just like owning yourself. Like if you have a gap in your resume or a gap on your LinkedIn, and I apologize, I'm trying to be professional, but there's a cat butt in the camera, so I apologize.
No worries.
Just own it. Just be honest if you so choose, or feel the strength to say, no, I don't need to divulge the information, because you deserve your own peace. And if you need time off, or if you got laid off, that's okay. You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to have a perfect lineage to show that you are deserving of a job or of a role. Taking 6 months off does not suddenly make you less of a human or less of a good employee. So just my 2 cents.
Yeah, very well said, Erica. That we have the freedom to choose, like you said, and being mindful of that when we are in front of that person, virtually or in person, right? Doing that interview, and doesn't matter which way we choose. Avino, anything to add briefly to Erica's points?
I think Erica covered it beautifully. I feel like anything I add would just take away from it.
Thank you so much. That is awesome. I'm just looking at time. Let's wrap up. I don't have any questions that I'm seeing, at least in here in Restream, from our chat. I know a lot of people tend to watch the recording and comment afterwards. But as the wrap-up question, what are some of the tips, or some tips that you have for your younger self? Let's say coming from maybe a non-traditional background or a marginal background, or way back when, 10 years ago. What would you say to yourself? And putting the lens of diversity in there if you can. And so if there's people watching this that are in that position, right? Like they're just graduating, or they're going to graduate, or they're doing an internship with no promise of a job coming up with the market. What would you say to your younger selves that others can also, find inspiring or helpful? So I think I can. Let's start with you, Saba.
Yeah. If I have to tell my younger self, I think the first thing I would say is like, yeah, embrace your or own your story, like Erica mentioned, like, embrace your uniqueness, embrace your from where you're coming from, embrace your, just be authentic and be yourself. It's not really required for you to put out or reframe your story or spin your story in a way that you feel you're not comfortable with. So I think that's the first main thing that I would tell myself, like, just be yourself. It's your story, and you've worked for it and you've worked on it, so be yourself. I think that's what I would tell myself, and I think I have learned it over the years. It took me some time to actually accept my story and own it now and speak it out open. Even sometimes now, I still think twice if I, if I'm like, okay, what's the environment, or am I allowed to say something like this? But I think it's just me developing that habit, and I think the earlier one does it, the better it is for themselves, for their growth. So I think that's something that I would say for myself. So yeah, I think, and it also comes from the history of like being a female, again, South Asian, and I also have in my, I feel like, okay, I'm coming from a minority background, I'm Muslim, so I have seen some stigma around that, biases around that. So it took some time for me to, just be myself and embrace my story. So that's what I would tell myself, yeah, younger self.
That's amazing. That's amazing, Saba. We'll do a quick roundtable on this. So how about you, Hero?
Yeah, I think I would say two things. One, be persistent. Don't let those rejects get in the way. It's just that they don't get it. And the second is, you are interviewing as much as as in the companies are interviewing you. So keep that in mind as you're going through it. The diversity lens helps you see what the company is about.
Awesome. Thanks. How about you, Erica?
Sure. I actually think about this a lot, but I'll keep it short. I think the biggest thing would be you are allowed to love your job and you are allowed to enjoy your job, but your job is not your life and your job is not your identity. And that is the biggest thing that I would have told myself in my teens and throughout my like early to mid 20s. Because I for sure thought that success at work meant success in life for the longest time. And I couldn't figure out why, but I'm doing all of these steps and I'm trying to outline this process and I'm creating all these plans and that should take me to this level and then this next level. And that's not how life works. So that's what I would tell myself. And also just to learn to roll with the punches, because I'm very much of a planner and an organizer, but you cannot control everything. And you can have the most organized, detailed plan in the world, and then something can happen and just blow the entire thing up. That's completely out of your control. And instead of trying to fix everything, sometimes you need to learn just to accept your current status.
So cool on acceptance. Thank you, Erica. Avinam?
Yeah, I'd say a lot of really good things said. I think ultimately, I don't know. I don't think I ever have like really practical advice. It's always a little fuzzy. I think it would be something to the effect of, there's that little voice inside or that flutter in your stomach or whatever, call it intuition. I think it's extremely powerful, and I think you need to listen to it, and it'll change over time, right? And like the way you define yourself will change over time. The way you cope with things will change. How focal your career is in your life versus all of a sudden it's just another source of something. Like it's not going to be the end all be all. Like a career is part of your life. It's not. It's a source. It should be a source of happiness, not the source of happiness. And I think it's just like listening to that little voice inside, even if it sounds a little crazy, and trusting it. I think it's really important.
Wow, such nuggets of wisdom. So I'll try and take a stab at summarizing. Listening to your own voice, I think what Avinam just said, and then also being yourself, being authentic, owning your own story, being persistent. Of course, we'll be disappointed, but not giving up with rejection, like what Hiro said. And then I think not confusing our identity with the job, because that can really take us down. And the more we start to believe that, the less likely, funny enough, we are to get a job, because we put too much pressure on ourselves and we don't perform well in interviews, right? The best interviews are where you actually have fun and you are not super stressed. So those are all the jobs that I've ever gotten, when I just went there and I literally had fun. Those are all the jobs I've ever gotten in my career. And when I was overstressed, I couldn't perform well. So I guess quick thoughts from me on any takeaways or tips. Yeah, persistence. I resonate with that a lot too. Yeah, owning your story. I think you all covered everything that I had in mind as well. But I would say keeping that growth mindset that I've been talking about at KriyaCon and on LinkedIn lately is that we are capable to learn from our own mistakes. And so when we have this mindset, I feel like we can stumble and pick ourselves up more easily than keep going rather than believing that things have to be linear. And, if we fail, then that's kind of it. So I think having that growth mindset of I'm capable to fall and rise. I'm capable to, overcome and learn and succeed. I think that's a huge thing, in addition to the acceptance that Erica talked about earlier. So just want to say a big thank you to all of you for coming on this panel. It was inspiring to me and hopefully to people watching. And thanks for taking the time.
Awesome.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye.
Bye-bye.